This is Daryl Turford from the Drivers Project, and I have a guest today that probably most people don't recognize, but they probably know, and that is Steve Thornton from Master Gassers. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Daryl. I appreciate it.
Could you give people a bit of your background? Because I feel like a lot of us in the racing world see your stuff on social media all the time, but we have no clue about you.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to actually kind of put my face out there, so I'm not just a social media account. But I grew up in Pennsylvania with a Northeast modified background. My family owned big block modifieds my whole life. I was going to the track every Saturday, every summer. And every time the URC 360 sprint cars were down at our local track at Bridgeport, I was just enamored by them. Like, I loved the sprint cars. I couldn't get enough of them. So, I mean, I kind of just really got into sprint car racing at a young age. And then I went to college, kind of shifted my focus, shifted careers. And when COVID hit, I moved across the country to Arizona and was fully working remote. And then I had the time to, start focusing on what I really love doing. And that's, sprint car racing and covering the sport. So I started Master Gassers and, here I am.
So I gave you a bit of homework before this, and I asked you to come up with your five most interesting stats from the year so far. You did come up with five, and let's go through them. The first one is concerning Justin Whittal. Could you take us through that stat?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of Justin Whittal. I think he had his breakout year this season. I think it was his first season where he's won more than one race. He got three wins, won $10,000 at Bridgeport, and he had a 28 race stretch from right before PA Speed Week, June 14th, and up until the Bridgeport race on November 2nd, where his average finish during that stretch was 7.6. All three wins came there, 15 top fives, 21 top tens. Um, and it was just really impressive. I thought, like, even when he was in the 23 car, it was great. So
So he did get a couple chances. He got a shot in the Glenn Stires ride in Florida and was actually able to make one of the outlaw shows. He got a chance in the 23 in Pennsylvania at the end of the year. If he gets a top tier ride, what do you think he's capable of based on the numbers you're seeing?
it's hard to say. It's funny, in the Glenn Stires ride, he actually went quick time and then he was light on scales. Um, or maybe not quick time, but it was definitely like in the top three.
It was first or second quick. Yep.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think he would need more experience at, a lot of tracks. He's raced primarily at Central PA, around Jersey. I think this was really the first year he kind of branched out a little bit. So I think, out on the road, his first season, it might not be the most impressive thing in the world, but, with some experience that, I think he could be like a top, 50 guy in the country at some point in his career. If you, if you look at sprint car ratings and the system that they have, he was 89th for the year 2023, and he went up 43 positions. He's 46th this season. So,
Yeah, I actually think his performances were really impressive. I don't think people realize how hard those Volusia fields are to make, so to be fast down there is impressive. And I was
yep,
at Charlotte and he looked fine. He blended in with everyone else and had plenty of pace and I thought he looked great. The
yeah.
next guy you wanted to talk about is from the West Coast, so pretty much the opposite side of the country, and that's Justin Sanders. What's the stat you have on Justin Sanders?
So, the thing, I mean, Justin Sanders had an incredible season. If you factor in his 360 wins with the 7 410 wins, he had 16 total wins. But the thing that really stuck out to me was he never left the West Coast. He only raced California, Oregon, and Washington. And he made 41 410 starts. And in those starts, his earnings were $2,855 per start, which is the fourth best in terms of regional average in the country. And he's behind Macri, Dietrich, and Reitzel, who all arguably race twice as much as he does and travel twice as much as he does. So it's just really impressive that he was able to do that with, only racing in 3 states.
Yeah, we had a chance to run with Justin. He ran a lot of the ASCS tour in 2020. 2020 or 2019. He was really darn good. And I hear people talk about how he was okay at the Knoxville Nationals when he got in 2 cars he was not real familiar with and made the Nationals both times. And I do think he's massively underrated on the East Coast. I think people on the East Coast understand he's good, but I don't think they
Right.
realize how good he is. And
Yeah, I
then
feel like they got a little taste of him when he was filling in for Macri for that little stretch, and I feel like he was in the dash with at least in the midweek high limit shows that were happening like pretty often. Like I was pretty impressed by what he was able to do.
yeah, I think he's probably the guy I'd like to see go on the road. We had Justin Fiedler on, and he said Justin Peck's the best guy to never win an outlaw race. We say Sanders. Based on your numbers, who would you say?
I mean, it's hard to argue with either of those Justins. I mean, I would say Peck is the most shocking just because of how many outlaw starts he actually has compared to how many outlaw starts Sanders has. But in terms of talent, like they're pretty similar. I mean, they're both pretty aggressive drivers. I mean, I feel like Sanders would probably be able to work the bottom on a bottom dominant track, whereas Peck can probably hit the cushion a lot better. I would have to go Peck is more surprising there.
So
Okay.
the third stat you have is a guy that I always see on underrated lists, and I think once you're always on underrated lists, it means you're not underrated. But I still think he's underrated, and that is Cole Duncan. Could you take us through your stats? I believe you had him on here just because he had to be underrated, and you listed some of the stats for why he's underrated.
Yeah, I mean just his overall stat line, he only made 33 starts. And people give him a lot of flack for, being at Atomic all the time or only racing, locally in Ohio. But Cole Duncan raced in 6 different states this year. So he did branch out a little bit. But I mean just his overall stat line, 10 wins in the 33 starts, 17 top fives, 27 top tens. I think he was top 10 at Eldora with the Outlaws, and then he was top 5 both times at Atomic. So, in underrated conversations, like Cole Duncan has to be the top of the list. I don't think we've ever seen him, in a really good ride outside of Ohio. So it's hard to say like where he would match up with people, but I would love to see him get a chance and just to see what he could do.
So I say Duncan's not underrated because every time we say underrated, he's listed. I didn't prep you for this question. Who's the guy the numbers say are massively underrated that really is like a name people would be like, who the hell are you talking about?
Um, so for the numbers, I would say Cameron Key. Um, he didn't have a ton of starts. I want to say he only had 12 to 14 starts, but he picked up a win. I don't know if it was in Power Eye. It might have been locally at Lake Ozark or something, or at Farmington. But for the amount of starts that he has under his belt, like I think you're going to be seeing a lot more Cameron Key in the next couple of years, and I think he's massively underrated, mainly because not that many people know about him. People probably know from the Chili Bowl, but in winged 410 action, not too much.
What's funny about that is I actually felt the same way, but I felt that way about 3 years ago. We ran some ASCS races at Lake Ozark. Power I was there. The first night he quick timed, I want to say, and the next night, one of the two nights, he beat Ayrton Geniton, like just straight up beat him.
Yep.
And then I thought, oh boy, this guy's going to come on, and then exactly what you said happened. He didn't race a lot. I expected I would see him race more after that, and I have not seen him race once in person since then. But he was damn fast when I saw him. I'd definitely
Yeah.
back up your choice there.
Yeah, he got
So
in that the Beaver car and looked really good. Like probably the best out of anyone, and there was Chase Randall in that car for a little bit. So
yeah. So the fourth guy who you have stats on is another guy that races a lot in that area and is actually very good at Lake Ozark, is Joe B. Miller. Joe B. Miller. And you wanted to bring up his final 15 starts of the season. Could you talk about those?
Yeah, so to close out the year, his final 15 starts, he was average finish 5.4. He had 4 wins in that stretch, 11 top fives, and 12 top tens. Nearly in the top 10 every single one of his starts. He had a really good win. I want to say it was at Jacksonville where he made a heroic last lap pass that was maybe a little bit questionable, but had to give him credit for throwing it all out there for the win. So I'm a big fan of Joby Miller.
Yeah, he is one of the toughest guys we've raced on bull rings. I haven't really seen him excel on bigger tracks. I thought they were going to upgrade their motor program last year, and I haven't really seen those performances on big tracks. But if he gets competitive on big tracks, I think he'd be a guy I'd love to see travel. I just don't know his situation well enough.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, and he can get in anything and win, you know. And I'm sure we'll see him at a Tulsa Shootout and Chili Bowl being competitive.
Yeah. So the last stat you have, I felt was your most impressive stat. I don't know if you feel the same way, but it was concerning Carson Macedo's top 5 finishing percentage. Could you take us through that?
Yeah, so Carson Macedo, running with the Outlaws all year. He finished the season with a 71.2% top five percentage. It's the highest in the country, let alone highest, at a national, regional, local level. It's literally the highest in the country for, I think, guys with, 15 eligible starts. But super impressive. And to kind of put it in perspective, like for in the high limit side of things, Brad Sweet had the highest percentage and it was, 59.4. So that's like a 12% gap between what Macedo was able to do, and in probably 15 more starts than Brad had.
Now, every time I put up a World of Outlaws stat, I always hear the same shit, which is, oh, he put up those numbers because he was running with the World of Outlaws and not High Limit. I didn't prepare you for this question, so take your time on the answer. What do the numbers show you about the competition levels between High Limit and World of Outlaws?
So if we're talking top 5 to 10 guys, it's actually pretty evenly matched, but the Outlaws kind of have a little bit of advantage. I think the top five would be Gravel. Then it's Macedo, it's Rico, it's Tyler Courtney, and it's Brad Sweet. So there's 3 high limit guys in there, but I think with what Gravel and Macedo were able to do this year, um, it's like pretty evenly matched. But I would kind of give the edge to the Outlaws, and I think people are going to be shocked by that because I get called a high limit homer all the time in my comments, or that I only cover high limit stuff and not World of Outlaw stuff. But I think everyone's right when they say that the Outlaws were really top heavy this year. But so in terms of through the field, I think high limit's more competitive. And now it's harder to get a top 10 finish with high limit, maybe, but it's hard. It's harder to get a top five with the Outlaw.
Interesting. Uh, yeah, like that's everything I've seen is that it's shockingly even. I put up
It is.
I put up that stat about guys in races with 5 high limits, uh, cars in it, and 5 World of Outlaw drivers
Mm-hmm.
in it, and everyone walked away going, "Oh my God, there's 6 high limit guys in there and 4 outlaw guys in there. High limit wins." It's like if I made that graphic a little longer and made it the top 12, it would be 6 versus 6.
Yep. Yes, it
I
would. But
I
then,
I do think you're
yeah,
right. After the top, I feel like high limit eighth on back is better. Like I feel like Bill Baylog will go up against the eighth guy in high limit just fine, but I
which
feel
is
like
what Baston probably. Yeah.
yeah, and then 9, 10, 11, 12. I feel like that's kind of where high limit starts to take over. But it's really hard to explain that to people.
Well, yeah. I mean, I feel like both show. I mean, obviously, it's always hard to make a World of Outlaw show, but like, I feel like high limit. they had 16 full timers, and you got to say it's 13 or 14 of them were pretty much locked to make the show. And then, three or four guys, might be in the B, you might be able to get there. So there's only so many spots left to make the A against them. So, like I said, top 10 harder against High Limit, top five harder against World of Outlaws.
And that's what the numbers are telling you. That's not being a fanboy or anything.
Nope.
So, I actually do have a question for you. And we kind of talked off the air, and you said you had like a background that wasn't related to numbers. I've always felt like the reason I've been interested in numbers, because I'm terrible at math, but I've always cared about numbers, is I want to know the truth or the real reason on why something happened, not just the quick 20-second answer. Do you feel the same way? Does it frustrate you when you deal with people that just want to give you that quick snap of the finger answer and never really think about it? Because I find it very frustrating.
I find it frustrating when, like, I don't know, if you're just like reading comments on some, sometimes you see something that you're like, well, I got the numbers on that. Like, you're wrong. But like, I don't find it frustrating. I think the reason I got into doing the numbers is because, number one, only so many people are clicking and reading all the things that I'm writing on the website or blog, whatever you want to call it, that I have. And I really like doing like these long-winded, breakdowns and previews. And like, I feel like to make those make sense, like you have to add, the statistics in there, and why I'm placing this guy like up here, or why I think this guy's going to make the Knoxville Nationals A main instead of like someone who you would think is a lock to make the Knoxville Nationals A main. So I think that's why I really like breaking it down with the numbers, because number one, you don't see all these guys racing nationally all the time. So for the regional guys, like to get a true picture of, how good some of these guys really could be, I feel like you have to go into the full picture of all the numbers.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. By the way, your previews are absolutely elite in terms of the previews I read for the big races. I feel like you understand what's going to affect an outcome better than your average guy does, and I absolutely love reading them. Thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll have you back on again.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Daryl.
Yeah.